All right, so today we're going to pull back the curtain on something that's so fundamental to our lives, we pretty much never even notice it's there. We're talking about the legal dance of offer and acceptance.
I mean, really, have you ever stopped to think about it? That one little click, it sets off this whole powerful legal chain reaction. And yeah, it feels totally instant, but it's actually built on centuries of legal ideas. So what is going on in that split second between your click and that sweet, sweet confirmation page? Okay, let's get into it.
You know, at its heart, a contract is built with a pretty simple formula. First, you got to have an offer and an acceptance. Put those together and you get a promise. Then you add something of value being exchanged, money for a product, what lawyers call consideration, and that promise levels up to become an agreement. If the law can actually enforce that agreement, boom, you have a contract. For this explainer, we're really going to zero in on that very first super crucial step, the offer and the acceptance. So everything kicks off with an offer. This is the opening move, right? The moment one person lays their cards on the table. But legally speaking, not just any old statement is going to count as a real binding offer. It has to be specific and it has to show a genuine intention to be bound by it.
Okay, let's break down this official sounding definition. The key things to focus on here are signifies, willingness, and obtaining the assent. See, this isn't just floating an idea out there. An offer means you're actively saying, here's the deal, and I'm totally ready to be locked into it if you say yes. So an offer can be made directly to one person. That's a specific offer. But, and this is where it gets interesting, it can also be made to the public, to the whole world. The classic case for this is Carlyle versus the Carbolic Smokeball Company. They ran an ad saying they'd pay £100 to anyone who used their smokeball and still got the flu. Well, Mrs. Carlyle did exactly that, and the court said, yep, that ad was a general offer to the world, and she accepted it by doing what you said. It's kind of like the 19th century version of a company offering a cash prize to anyone who finds a bug in their software.
Okay, this leads to a fantastic real-world question. If a company can make an offer to the whole world with an ad, then surely that little price tag on a sweater in a store is an offer, right? You pick it up, take it to the counter, and they have to sell it to you at that price. Well, not exactly.
And this is where we meet a super important legal idea, the invitation to treat. That price tag on the sweater, it's not an offer. It's an invitation for you to make an offer to the store. As you can see here, things like menus, catalogs, and goods sitting on a shelf are just expressing a willingness to start a conversation. You're the one who makes the formal offer at the cashier, and the store accepts it. The so what here is huge. This is what protects sellers from being forced to sell an item at a mislabeled price, or if they, just ran out of stock.
All right, so once a real offer is on the table, the ball is officially in the other person's court. But just like the offer, the acceptance has its own set of rules. You can't just say sure and call it a day. It has to be done the right way. This definition really highlights a critical moment of transformation. The second the person receiving the offer signifies their assent, that one-sided proposal magically becomes a two-sided binding promise. It's the legal point of no return. Now, this is maybe the most important rule of all when it comes to acceptance. To be valid, an acceptance has to be a perfect mirror image of the offer. It has to be absolute and unqualified. If you say something like, I accept, but can I pay you on Tuesday instead of Monday? Well, guess what? That is not an acceptance. That's actually a rejection of the original offer, and you've just made a brand new one. It's called a counteroffer. The old case of Hyde versus Wrench is the perfect story for how this works. So, Wrench offered to sell his farm for £1,000. Hyde countered with $950. Wrench said, nope. Then Hyde came back and said, okay, fine, I'll take it for the original $1,000. But the court ruled there was no contract. Why? Because Hyde's counteroffer of $950 had legally destroyed the original £1,000 offer. It was gone, vanished, and he couldn't just bring it back from the dead. Okay, so you've got a clear offer and a perfect mirror image acceptance. But when exactly does that yes become official? In an era of letters, telegrams, and now, instant messages, timing is absolutely everything. And the law has had to create some clever rules to solve this whole communication puzzle. Basically, the law came up with two key rules. For slow, non-instant communication, like old-fashioned mail, we have the postal rule. As you can see here, the acceptance is considered complete against the person making the offer the moment the letter is posted. But for fast, instantaneous stuff like phone calls or emails, the acceptance only counts when it's actually received. The case of Adams versus Linsell is a wild example of how this rule can cause some serious drama. An offer to sell wool was mailed on September 2nd. It got delayed and didn't arrive until the 5th, but the buyer immediately mailed their acceptance back. But then, on the 8th, before he even got the acceptance, the seller sold the wool to somebody else. The court found that a binding contract was formed the moment that acceptance was mailed on September 5th, so the seller was in breach of contract.
This all brings us to a final, really important question. What if you make an offer, but then you change your mind? Can you take it back? This is the law of revocation, and just like everything else we've talked about, it is all about the timing. So here's the bottom line. You can revoke or cancel your offer at any point right up until the moment the other party accepts. If we go back to our postal rule example, that means you'd have to get your revocation to them before they drop that acceptance letter in the mailbox. Once it's sent, it's too late, game over, the deal is done.
Of course, revocation isn't the only way an offer can die. As we see here, an offer can also just end. It can terminate if a set amount of time passes, if a specific condition isn't met, or, a bit grimly, if the person who made the offer passes away or becomes incapacitated before it's accepted. So we've just walked through all these cases involving farms and wool and smoke balls from the 1800s, and it might seem ancient, but here's the incredible thing. These exact same principles are the engine that's running our modern digital economy. Just think about it for a second. That Amazon product page, that's the invitation to treat. You putting an item in your cart and clicking proceed to checkout, that's your offer. And that confirmation email they send you a second later, that's their acceptance. Every click, every tap, every time you agree to a new app's terms of service, you're doing this very old legal dance.
And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. We have built this instantaneous digital world on a legal foundation from the age of quill pens and snail mail. So as we move into a future of automated contracts and AI negotiations, the big question is, will these foundational rules of offer and acceptance still hold up? Or are we going to need a whole new dance?